Wow, everybody got quiet just at the right time. Good morning. Welcome to this place of peace, justice, and hope. I'm Julia Beckman. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm pleased to be with you today as your worship associate. Our music today will be provided by Jamie Passman, who just did a lovely rendition of Norwegian Wood. I just hoped you noticed that. We'd like to thank you for placing your electronic gadgets in worship mode now, but please do feel free to check in on social media and let folks know you are worshiping here today. I understand some pictures of the bubbles went out last week. That was good. Childcare is available in the lower level of the RE building across the alley. You are welcome to take your children there at any time, but children are welcome to remain in the service. All voices are welcome here. There's always a lot going on around the church, and you can read all about it in News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday, and there are printed copies available downstairs. If you'd like to receive News and Notes, stop by the welcome table in the living room at the back of the church. In addition, today there will be a time for discussion of this morning's service, and you'll understand why when you've seen the service, at 11:45. That means you've got 5-10 minutes to run down and get your coffee and come back up. There will be a Zoom option next week. Please see your News and Notes for that. And also, of course, during coffee hour, if you are visiting, welcome. And please, if you come to coffee hour, grab a green mug so that we can know who you are and get to know you better. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Beth. My pronouns are she and they. And I want to add my welcome to that of Julia. It is good to see you this morning on this so far sunny morning. Every time I wake up here, having moved from sunny but rainy right now, Southern California, when it's sunny, I announce to my cat, Ms. B, it's sunny. So I welcome you this morning. On Thursday, March 30th, it was announced that the Vatican rescinded the century-long doctrine of discovery, the name for the series of papal decrees that were the basis and justification for the colonization of indigenous lands and peoples throughout the world. The doctrine of discovery established a religious, political, and legal justification for the colonization and seizure of land not inhabited by Christians. What began as a religious decree in the 1400s became the basis for a legal concept in Canada and in the US. In the US, when the doctrine of discovery was invoked in 1823, the US Supreme Court ruling that indigenous people had only rights of occupancy, not ownership, over the lands they had long lived on. As recently as 2005, the doctrine of discovery was invoked and named by Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her statement and comments about a ruling on the Oneida people in New York. Rescinding the doctrine was a long time in coming. In particular, there was Canadian Indigenous people who were pressuring the Vatican to rescind this decree. While we can acknowledge and even celebrate that step, we know the damage that has been done was irreparable because reparations have never been made to the first and still peoples of this land and to the formerly enslaved who were also enslaved under the auspices of the doctrine of discovery. Here in Hinsdale, we're on the land originally inhabited by the Badwe-Wadmi, otherwise known as the Potawatomi, the Oteche Ka-Tau Vin, the Ka-Poi, also known as the Kickapoo. As I've mentioned previously, this acknowledgement is not meant to be performative, but informative, with the hopes of becoming transformative. As a practice, land acknowledgements offer the opportunity, and I would say imperative, to go beyond words to acts of solidarity. And I offer this to y'all with some hesitancy, because I don't know yet what it looks like here in the western suburbs of Chicago. But I want to learn, and I invite you to learn with me. In a moment of solidarity and appreciation for the indigenous people, the enslaved, formerly enslaved people, I invite you into worship this morning with words by William Stafford. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. Beloveds, I acknowledge that we come today with our hearts heavy and broken at the latest mass shooting, and we may ask now, what is that thread? Where is that thread? As we prepared for today's service, an exploration of our Unitarian Universalist living tradition, this is what we know. We center love as the thread that binds and guides us. And in that spirit, I invite you to rise in body or spirit and sing together, answering the call of love.
Our chalice lighting words are by Judith L. Quarles. At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth.
So I'm wondering if there's any young at heart that'd like to come up. Luke, do you want to come up? No? Okay. Hi.
I'm so excited I get to be with you today, and we can talk about love.
So the story today is called I Am Love of Compassion. And there's the little character. So if you can't see the pictures, you'll have to close your eyes and imagine what she might be looking like. When I see someone going through a storm of hurt and unfairness, of anger and sadness, when the sun disappears and the skies grow dark, and all I see is fear, I ask myself, what can I do to help let the light back in? I put my hands on my heart and I listen. And that is where I find the answer. I have compassion. I can act with tenderness. I am love. I can listen and not say a word. I can be there. Love is being present. I can hug and hold and say, everything will be all right. Love is comfort. I can speak softly and choose my words and actions carefully, for love is gentle. I can give thanks for all I have and am able to share, because love is gratitude. I can keep my mind and my body safe and healthy, because love is taking care of me. I can express what's important to me. Love is creative. I can know that no one is perfect, because love is understanding. I can do my best to make things better when something is wrong, for love is effort. I can celebrate those I've loved before. Love is remembering. I can find goodness in a kind word, a helping hand, or a shared smile, because love is tiny gestures. I can breathe in the air that the whole world shares and know all creatures are made from the very same stardust, because love is connection. When the clouds roll in for others and for me, I know now that there is something I can do. I can let my heart lead the way, because I am love. You are love. We are love. And with love, we will weather the storm and light up the sky together. Amen. And blessed be.
Thank you so much for that beautiful message of love. Invite us to sing our children out to their classes for those who are leaving. Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As we consider the importance of our history and our living tradition this morning, we invite the spirit of generosity in support of this, our church home. Clever, huh? This church is made, please say with me the words. Oh, are they on the screen?
Yeah, they're going to be.
There we go. Please say together, this church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with people around us, and with all the world. We now gratefully receive your contribution. Thank you in advance for your generosity.
May the gifts that we've received, generously given, and gratefully received allow us to continue to do the work of building the beloved community, the not yet always coming into being community of justice and love. I invite you to take a breath with me and just be. Just breathe for a moment. Maybe you haven't consciously breathed for a while. Maybe in the hustle and bustle of getting here and the week, and this is a time to breathe. And just follow the rhythm of your natural breath as it flows in and out. You don't have to do anything special. Let the breath breathe you. Maybe feel your shoulders drop. See where the breath takes you. Where in your body is need of the life of breath and the spirit of life? Feel your body on the chair. And for those of you watching us on YouTube, maybe you're on your couch or in your bed, wherever you are, just be. And allow yourself to inhabit your body. Knowing that the breath rather connects us to everything that ever was, everything that is, and to everything that will be. What is it that you brought with you today? Your joys, your sorrows, your challenges, your blessings, or just your beingness is enough. We enter this space bringing with us joys and sorrows, challenges and blessings. So taking in another breath, connecting with what it is that you brought with you today. We invite you, if you have something that's weighing on you or dancing in your heart this morning, you're invited to come up and light a candle. If you wish, you can say a name or a word or a short phrase to share your intention, reminding you that candles can also be lit in silence. To invite you, if you have something this morning, to come on up.
Good morning. Chris and I have two celebrations to share with you today about two of our children who were raised with your help here. In the Navy was just meritoriously promoted to Petty Officer Second Class, so we're very excited for him. And our daughter yesterday, Trixie, accepted her admission to the University of Illinois, where she'll study sciences.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Swintek. I just wanted to, going along with the theme of love, this week me and my husband celebrated 20 years together. We were high school sweethearts, and he was my senior prom date. Congratulations.
Hi there, I'm Casey Edgen, and I lit a candle for my dad.
Hello, Tim and I have a joy to share today. Our youngest daughter, Ariana, just passed her board exams and is now a forensic psychologist.
Hello, my name is Tim, and I would like to wish my lovely wife, Paula, in the back, a very happy birthday.
Hi there. I'm Angela. I'm kind of new here, but I've been here before. And I'm just lighting a candle for all 4 of my kids, pretty much. I love them, so.
Speaking of love. And we light an additional 3 candles. The first, for those joys and sorrows that are being held in our hearts that have gone unspoken. The next, for all who are suffering from oppression, need, loneliness, near and a world away. And for those suffering from the ravages of war. I invite you to hold with me a moment of silent reflection. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, you are as close as our breath. You are our breath. As we gather in the silence and solidarity and love of this place, may we know that we are never apart from your love. As we celebrate the thread of love that binds us across space and time, we celebrate all that we've heard. We mourn with all who have lost. As we move through our lives this day and in the days to come, beloveds, remember this. You are always and everywhere held in love and mystery deeper than you can know. Okay, beloveds, in a moment, we are going to sing one of my favorite songs. The lyrics to the next hymn were written in 1933 by Marion Franklin Ham in advance of the first hymnal that was going to be shared by the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. It was called Hymns of the Spirit. And if it weren't still packed in boxes, I would have brought it to show you. Now, it was intentionally written to celebrate the growing relationship between the 2 denominations who were finding it useful to work together. In fact, they had been flirting with one another for many years while moving closer together. Unitarianism and Universalism, each with deep roots in American history, both responded to Calvinism's damning and damaging doctrines, the Universalists to predestination, the idea that a good God would damn God's people to hell, which they found pernicious. The Unitarians' pessimistic view of human nature. The joke goes, some of you have heard it, that Unitarians believed that God was too good to damn them, And the Universalists believed that God was too good to damn them, and the Unitarians believed they were too good to be damned. True that. Universalism was largely found in rural areas focused on theology. Unitarianism was largely founded in cities, Boston to be specific, and focused on humankind's free will and dignity. Each had their own stories of an evolving liberal religious values, both living traditions. There were definitely points of similarity and points of difference. Each had their own controversies that further formed and changed them. Each understood the call of liberal religion to build a just society. However imperfectly each did that, each liberal religion had this as at their core. Now, can you imagine how exciting it was at the General Assembly, which is the annual meeting for, it was the Unitarians had a meeting, the Universalists had a meeting, everybody had a meeting. They had a lot of meetings in the run-up to the merger. There was meeting after meeting and talk after talk. There was conversations with congregations. There was a vote in 1961 to pursue the merger. But can you imagine the excitement when the final votes were cast and a new Unitarian Universalist Association was formed? And the assembled body sang this hymn together. I invite you to rise, embody your spirit. Look at number 143 in your hymnal. That written in 1933. Now, I have an old black and white picture of that General Assembly service where this was sung. And I could imagine what it was like. I am an unrepentant nerd when it comes to a number of things, but in particular, Unitarian Universalist history and polity, which is our governance, because it's formed us. It makes us who we are. As you sang the words to that song, did they feel current to you? Even though it's an old hymn, right, Jamie? It's an old tune, melody. I don't even know where it comes from. But I'm struck every time I sing it or read it that it is still the call for these times. It is still the call to a centering love. It is still the call for us, all here as Unitarian Universalists, here in Hinsdale, Illinois, and across this country, to be the prophetic church. Do we need a prophetic church right now? Do we need those prophetic voices that lift up human dignity, human worth, the need to be free, and the assertion of the democratic principles in our congregations and in society at large? So much. So today, and I know y'all at Hinsdale Unitarian Church know this so well, that we stand in the stream of a living tradition, influenced and shaped by people seeking freedom and truth, maintaining the tradition with diligence, with love, with respect for the past, and in the spirit of innovation. We shift, we change. Sometimes it seems kicking and screaming because, change is hard. You can imagine our Unitarian forebears who had a Christian identity, who then the transcendentalists come along and say, you could know God directly through nature. Thank you, Emerson. And leaving off of the miracles, Theodore Parker, the permanent and the transient in Christianity, it shook things up. Just like it shook things up when our humanist forebears said, well, you could be religious without God. Imagine that. And the Universalists, who asserted the unfailing love of God, and then shifted to the understanding of the universality of all religion and the universality of love. We change as our understandings of the world and hence ourselves, as new and partial truths disclose wisdoms that claim us. Each step of the way we define ourselves by our bond of union, our covenants, which is why I loved reading our covenant my first Sunday here, by our statements and our principles and purposes. This has been true of Unitarianism, Universalism, Unitarian Universalism, our denomination, our faith, and of course, our congregations as well. Our church was seeded as a Universalist church from a liberal congregation. But then there was a short time of a fire and not meeting, but we count our founding as 1887 by the esteemed Unitarian minister, William Channing Gannett. Our building, this building, right here, y'all, was dedicated this month in 1889. William Channing Gannett had words to say at the Western Unitarian Conference in 1887. He called it things commonly believed among us. We believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion. We hold reason and conscience to be final authorities in the matters of religious belief. We honor the Bible and all inspiring scripture, new and old. We revere Jesus and all the holy souls that have taught men truth and righteousness and love, all prophets of religion. We believe in the growing nobility of man. We understand the unfolding universe as beautiful, beneficent, unchanging order. To know this order is truth, to obey it is right and liberty and stronger life. We believe that good and evil invariably carry their own recompense, no good thing being failure and no evil thing success, that heaven and hell are states of being, that no evil can befall the good man in either purchase life or death, and that all things work together for the victory of the good. We believe that we ought to join hands and work to make the good things better and the worst good, counting nothing good for self, that is not good for all. We believe that this self-forgetting, loyal life awakens in man the sense of union here and now with all things eternal. The sense of deathlessness, and this sense is to us an earnest of the life to come. We worship one in all, that life whence suns and stars derive their orbits, and the soul of man is aught, that light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world, giving us power to become sons of God, that love with which our souls commune. So much of that may still resonate with us today. And so much of it jangles in our ears, perhaps. Perhaps the language of mankind and men. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And I think the other thing, which was a hallmark of Unitarianism for decades, is this optimism. I was going to call it a blind optimism, and I would not say that about Gannett, excuse me, or any of our Unitarians, but this idea, and it was spoken by James Freeman Clarke, the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. What an optimistic view. I think with this view, so many decades and decades later, we may be a little less optimistic. We know that the road to this world that we seek and so deeply long to birth into being is still being birthed. It's tenuous at best. So by reading this by the founding minister of this church, we can see that this living tradition has evolved, has it not? With new insight, new wisdom, new experiences, and it is integrated. And there is a through line. I think the through line is love, is care for humanity. I feel absolutely confident that Gannett and the rest would include this beautiful earth in their care. Now, in 1922, Louis Fisher, a Universalist theologian, wrote this. It may be familiar to some of you. Universalists are often asked to tell where we stand. Is this familiar to anyone? The only true answer to give is that we do not stand at all, we move. We do not stand still, nor do we defend any immovable position. We grow, as all living things forever must do. The main questions with Universalists are not where we stand, but which way are we moving? Our main interest is to perceive what is true progress and to keep our movements in line with that, and not to allow ourselves to move round and round in circles, simply like a squirrel in a cage. Old worn phrases are always losing their old meanings and must forever be finding new meanings in the light of new experiences. So we heard from a Unitarian in the 1800s, a Universalist in the early 1900s. And it was through these conversations between these two denominations, which, as I said, had been in conversation for a long time. Our youth groups, I don't know, how many of you remember liberal religious youth? Okay, just raise your hands big. Come on, y'all. LRY, liberal religious youth. Oh my goodness, I heard all about y'all. But they merged first. The youth merged in 1954. And there's another beautiful song, We Would Be One, that we didn't sing today, that was actually written in honor of the merging of the two youth groups. So again, this process had been happening for a while. And Eventually, after, as I said, the long conversations, and seriously, y'all, I mean a lot of meetings, the UUA was born, and we are part of the UUA. Of course, creating a new organization needed bylaws. How many board members do we have here? How many board members, raise your hand if you are a board member, raise your hand if you've ever been a board member. Okay, keep them up. Raise your hand if you've ever been on any kind of board, any kind of organization. Yep, and did y'all have bylaws? Mm-hmm. I love bylaws. I confess, I do. They guide us. They're moral documents in some ways, just like our covenants and our mission statements. They're moral documents. They say, how are we going to be together? Now, they're necessary, legally mandated, right? If you're a 501c3, which we are, right, Bob? Yep. Then some congregations aren't. Then we're mandated by law to have bylaws. Personally, I like thin bylaws because they give us room to grow and to move. That's just my preference rather than prescribing every little thing. So bylaws were created. Probably was, well, if you've ever read the Premise and the Promise by Warren Ross, I hope we have it in someplace. Otherwise, I'll get a copy and we'll put it in. Talks about the founding of the UUA and the process and the controversies. Because, y'all, we are formed in and through controversy, Unitarians and Universalists. I hinted at them a little earlier. And so controversy just means there's lively thought. It's how are we going to be together? And that, beloveds, is covenant. So Article 2 was in our founding bylaws. How many of you are familiar with the 7 principles, right? How many of you know that there's more to Article 2 than the 7 principles? Okay, I got some hands. Yeah, of course I do. Fellow nerds raising their hands proudly. Thank you for that. There's an inclusion clause, there's a diversity clause, there's various clauses that, and included in Article 2 as it is written right now are our sources. And really I know it's very exciting. You're so excited to stay after the service because we're gonna talk all about it and there's handouts. And if you join us online on Tuesday, there's PowerPoint. I know, PowerPoint, which is not all here because we have seen my PowerPoint skills in evidence today with tiny print. Don't worry about it. Alex, I'll get better, I promise. As the creation of the original principles, the 6, really were a huge topic of discussion as the American Unitarian Association, the Universalist Church of America, decided to merge. The Unitarians, frankly, y'all, were a little worried that that the Universalists were worried that they might be subsumed by the more well-known and more larger Unitarians, which is why I always say I'm a Unitarian Universalist, because we don't want to lose that thread. So I am gonna, you can't read this, but I'm gonna read them for you. But it's just a hint, this is a preview of the PowerPoint that you're gonna see on Tuesday if you join us. Article 2, the original language for the 6 principles. In accordance with these corporate purposes, because there's a purpose statement, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking. Number 1, to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. To cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian teachings as love to God and love to man. To affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, the use of the democratic method in human relationships, to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace, to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. Now, there were folks who started to be a little restive, a little uncomfortable with some of the language of the principles. Those would be for my long-term Unitarian Universalists who were involved in the Women's Federation. If you were, raise your hand. If you were involved or know of the Women's Federation, you know that it was through the Women's Federation that the proposal to change these principles was brought about. Because they're a little dated, right? A little gendered language. So what happened was, and I'm not going to go into this, but a long process of creating new principles. I'm going to go ahead, and I think you know what they are. Well, there were some changes that were taking place over time. There were additions, there were, different kinds of recommendations. But let me just go over, which I think you know, but I'm just going to quickly read the 7 principles. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Covenant, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part, which was added later. And then there were the many sources from which we drew. And so it is that we are at a time now when we look at the changes that have happened and we look at changes that are proposed and will come about. First, it's important to note that these principles and sources were changed. Earth-centered traditions were added to the sources, which are the 6 sources. For those of you who are here, those of you at home, you may have a hymnal, but there's a hymnal in your seat, and you can see the principles and the sources. The final piece of that clause was grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith. We're inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another a mutual love and support. And this is important. It's the articulation of this as a covenant. Now, again, there's been some small changes. In 2009, the Commission on Appraisal was charged with, which is a nationally elected committee, was charged with inviting our congregations to consider changing the principles. It was extensive conversation with congregations, meetings at the General Assembly, visiting with congregations, and a proposed small revision failed in a very close vote of the General Assembly. I remember standing there and watching it happen, and it failed by 13 votes. I was there, the room was charged. In 2017, 2 proposals were put forward after much process. One was to change the first principle from we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people to all beings, which failed. I was involved with the First Principle Project, which looked at inviting congregations into the conversation of changing that first principle. And at that General Assembly, I spoke against it because I had heard from my disabled and colleagues and fellow religionists of color, and we don't have our worth and dignity yet. It's not time. And one change that took place changed our sources from prophetic deeds of men and women to prophetic words and deeds of people, which passed in one time. What has to happen when bylaw changes, it takes a couple of years, but what was required is a major supermajority, and it passed at that General Assembly. Now, in 2020, there was a discussion to officially adopt an eighth principle. It began at, a local level with Paula Cole Jones and one of her colleagues. It's been the subject of conversation and debate at local and national settings. Hundreds of congregations have voted to adopt the eighth principle, affirming that anti-racism and anti-oppression work is central to who we are. And I'm pleased to say that we, in this congregation, voted to affirm the eighth principle. Now, what does that mean for us? What it means is that we, as individual congregations, have devoted ourselves, committed ourselves to living out what that eighth principle calls us to do. What's going to happen in the long run? More will be revealed and I have the eighth principle here, just really briefly. Nope, I'm going to skip it because you couldn't see it that well, and I took it out. Now, those who hammered out our principles and purposes knew and expected that we would change them, even improve them, toss them for something better that represents our deeper and current commitments, which is why the bylaws mandated that we do it every 15 years. So when we did it back in 2010, a long time had gone by. Now we're here in 2023, a long time has gone by. My colleague and dear friend Pat McLaughlin said, we're called to be brave enough to evolve and adapt for the 21st century. And we are in a place of change again. Based on our values, our inclusion, and our purpose. At the introduction to Article 2 is where the principles, the purposes, the sources, our inclusion and diversity, all of those clauses are in Article 2. Now let me get a little nerdy, right? You can go online and read Article 2. You can read the whole UUA bylaws. They're right there for everybody to read, and I know you're going to go home and read them. And then you're going to go home and you can read what you're going to state for the discussion all about Article 2. So there has been an intentional process of exploring the change to Article 2. There is an Article 2 study commission that has been doing their work since 2020, including Paula Cole Jones and a diverse group of people who have spoken with congregations, held meetings. Have any of you been to any of the study meetings or study groups or discussions online or at General Assembly about Article 2? Okay, well, we're getting up to speed. That's what we're doing here. We're going to get up to speed because there's stuff happening coming up. This is kind of the introduction to that. I'm going to quote it. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant, congregation to congregation, and through our association, to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw on our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Y'all, the spiritual discipline of love. One of the things that people have talked about over the years is the principles are beautiful as a covenant. My sister is a liberal Catholic and affirm all of those principles. There isn't a lot of theology there. There's no theology there, frankly. But what do we have? We have a theology of love, that love is at the center, and that this idea that we're accountable for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. inseparable from one another. So I'm going to read them in a minute really quickly, and they're on your graphic. One of the things that we know is that we'll shift, the proposal is to shift from the 7 principles to talk about our shared values. Now, one of the things that we're going to go over in our discussion and our workshop is you can see, because it really honestly didn't work on a slide, to show you how they pair and how they match and how the concepts of the principles are here in our shared values. So really quickly, I love this graphic. It's got love at the center. Props to Reverend Cynthia Landrum, who created PowerPoint, and Reverend Elizabeth Carrier-Ladd, who also created PowerPoints. These are our shared values. This is the core of the change in Article 2. Interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generosity, equity. I'm not going to read each of those. And then it says, as Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us live our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Grateful for the religious ancestries we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. In part, there was no way to list every source that we drew from. When the Commission on Appraisal tried doing that, they added process theology, feminist theology, liberation theology, in addition to the other sources. But this gives us the opportunity to name and hold the multiplicity of the traditions that form and that claim us. Now, in 2020, at the General Assembly, the 8th principle was considered. And rather than continuing to make these piecemeal changes, that was when we voted to reconsider how do we articulate our faith. That's when the study commission was created. Now, this is what's going to happen. Over the past 2 years, there have been study groups, there's been webinars, there's been opportunities to listen, to make changes, to suggest changes. There's still an opportunity to give some feedback as of April 2023, this month. A first draft was proposed back in 2022, and the final 21, and the final proposal and report was published in 2022. So this is what's going to happen at General Assembly in June this year. The GA delegates will consider the Article 2 proposal, not whether to adopt it, but whether to study it, because bylaw change is a big thing. I mean, and you can see how big of a change this would be, right? So we agree to study it. Does this feel like the next articulation of our faith is one of the questions. If the vote passes by 50%, all of us spend a year in study and discussion. In 2024, the UGA delegates will decide whether or not to adopt Article 2. It requires a 2/3 majority, and the national adoption of this would change our bylaws. And then each congregation would decide how we live from that new language. So that was a lot. It was a little nerdy, but I hope it was interesting to you. I hope it was exciting to you, because this is the nature of our faith: to move, to change, to study, to take consideration, and then to act. To act and say, who are we called to be? Because this is really a study of those 3 questions, right? Who have we been? Who are we now? Who are we called to be? In a world that is, frankly, I think, more complex. An acknowledgement of all the diversity that has always been there. And so I invite us to really consider as a congregation sending delegates to the General Assembly. You can do it online, but it's in Philadelphia this year. There's going to be a Cubs and Philadelphia baseball team, whatever their name is, game that I have tickets to. So you're more than welcome to come. So we can talk about this. Who would like to be delegates? Who would like to engage in this process? You don't have to be a delegate to attend the General Assembly. I'm going to close with a prayer by Reverend Joe Cherry. Let the center hold. This is my prayer. Please, let the center hold. The center is what holds our faith. The strength of the center is what allows us to stretch farther into the future, to the unknown, the untried, the uncertain, the unnerving, the places where growth happens. Let the center be strong, and let the center of this living tradition move with the times. Let the center of our living tradition lead the times. May the strength of the center strengthen us as we seek, as we embody, work for equity, demand justice for all. Let our center hold, strong as an old oak tree, flexible as the willow tree, life-giving as an orange tree, evergreen as the pine tree, ever beautiful as the almond tree in blossom. May it be so. Amen. I love you. Invite you to join me in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment, as we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. Okay, now, I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, and sing our closing hymn, Building a New Way, because that's what we're doing, y'all. We're building a new way. And can I get an amen? Beloveds, as we go forth from this place, may we go forth with love, justice, and the spirit of hope and peace in our hearts.
This piece I'm going to play is dedicated to the United States of America, who oftentimes is like a child who's born. This stupid hair I have, this was a bet. I said Trump would be indicted at least a year ago, and I don't think I heard it. So say goodbye to the hair.
No. Wait until he's convicted.
No, just the indictment. So say goodbye to the hair.